Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horn, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horn, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast.
Welcome to this episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horn. I am absolutely delighted to have in our virtual studio today, Dr. Frank Douglas. And I want to tell you a little about Dr. Douglas and he'll have an opportunity to introduce himself in just a short bit as well. But he is an award-winning industry veteran with more than 3 decades of experience in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and entrepreneurship. Douglas has held leadership roles in both large and small biopharmaceutical companies. He led teams that were responsible for the development and marketing approval of many drugs, including Allegra, Lantus, Taxotere, and Actonel. I hope I got all of those the names correct. Dr. Douglas has held several academic positions while at MIT. Douglas was professor of the practice in the MIT Sloan School of Management. Did you know my friend Ed Schein? And also had similar appointments recently passed, and also had similar appointments in the departments of biology, biological engineering, and the Harvard MIT Division of Health Sciences and Technology, and was the founder and first executive director of the MIT Center for Biomedical Innovation. Dr. Douglas is the recipient of the 2007 Black History Makers Award and has been honored twice as the Global Pharmaceutical R&D Director of the Year in recognition of his leadership and success in improving innovation and productivity in pharmaceutical companies. He has also received the Medal of Honor and an honorary professorship from the Johann Wolfgang von Goethe Institute in Frankfurt, Germany. He was honored as one of the Jeffrey Bean Gives Back and GQ magazine's 2010 Rock Stars of Science and received the Caribbean Luminary Award from the American Foundation for the University of the West Indies and the Executive of the Year Award from the local affiliate of Sales and Marketing Executives International. Other awards include the NOBCC Che Lifetime Achievement Award, I hope I got that correct, and the Lewis B. Russell Memorial American Heart Association Award. Douglas holds a BS in chemistry from Lehigh University, that's in Pennsylvania, in physical chemistry, and an MD from Cornell University. He did his internship and residency in internal medicine at the Johns Hopkins Medical Institution, Baltimore, I believe, and a fellowship in neuroendocrinology at the National Institutes of Health. Well, Dr. Douglas, that's so wonderful to have you as a guest on Authentic Change with Mike Horn. Could you say a few words about yourself? Do your own introduction, please.
Well, I think you've done an excellent job introducing me. I have been, as I tell people, blessed in a real sense in that I have had the opportunity to work in several disciplines as an academician, also in industry as a drug developer, and also as a member of the board of management of a top 5 global pharmaceutical company. Have had the opportunity to be on the board of startup companies, ran a startup myself. And now my mission is to bring to individuals who are really suffering from episodes of systemic discrimination. And I use the discrimination and not racism because it goes across not only ethnicity, but it's gender-based, it may be sexual orientation, etc. And these things, of course, not only lead to conflict, they also lead to impairing the well-being of the aggrieved individuals. So this is for the last 3 years, this has been my mission and preoccupation, if you like.
So, someone with your background, how do you come to working on issues that I typically, consider in the realm of social justice, systemic institutional change? How does that find a path for you, Dr. Douglas?
Well, that has been my life. I grew up in what was British Guiana, now Guyana, and actually came to America 60 years ago in 1963. What was important about that? It was August 20th, 1963, which was about 8 days before Martin Luther King's famous march on Washington. I came to America on a Fulbright scholarship. And at that time, when I arrived, I was on a 2-week orientation course for the Fulbright scholars at Yale. And a very interesting thing happened. 3 days into the orientation, I had to make a presentation. And I awoke that morning with severe pain. So I got over to the conference room as early as I could, told the professor of my problem, and he looked at me and said, you Black students are always finding excuses. Now that you are a Fulbright scholar, you're going to have to work hard to deserve that honor. I was astounded by it, really astonished. Fortunately, I could go to the leader, the director of the program, who took me to the Yale New Haven hospital, where I was immediately admitted and spent 10 days in diagnostic evaluation and treatment. Later, I learned that during that time, Martin Luther King had made this famous statement in which he said that he had hoped, or that he hoped, that his 4 young girls one day would be living in a country where they were not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I thought, wow, I was just judged by the color of my skin and not the content of my character. Unfortunately, that was the beginning of my introduction to racism and prejudice in America.
And you had that introduction. This is 1963, and something happens in between. There's more discrimination. Let's use your word. More racism.
Yes, I had many episodes, but I learned one thing. And if I may share this story, because it's very important. It was indeed the thing that has, in a way, set me on my present mission. And when I completed my PhD at Cornell, I was hired by Xerox. And for 3 months, I could not get a good project. And one day, a young white man joined the group. He had not completed his PhD. And within a week, he was put on the most attractive project in research and development at the time. I went to my boss to ask when would I be placed on a good project, and got the usual excuses. And I suddenly said to him, Steve, don't think of me as though I'm Frank Douglas. Think of me as though I'm Bob. And I was astounded to see the recognition come in his face. And when he said to me, you're right. Bob has only been here a week, and I've put him on the artery project. I was furious. I darted out of his office, went down to the office of the senior vice president to give him yet another example of where I was being discriminated against. Now, about 2 or 3 years later, I reflected on that incident and realized that I had missed two things. The first was that the senior vice president had hired 3 young Black PhDs that summer in order to increase from 1 to 4 the number of Black PhDs in research and development at Xerox. So it probably was more important to him that Frank Douglas would do well than it was to Frank Douglas. The second thing that I missed was that my desired outcome was to get a good project. This was not for the senior vice president to go and have tough words with my manager. So had I reframed the question or the issue, and had I said to the senior vice president, Dr. Tribus, could you help my manager find me a good project? I probably would have retired from Xerox because that was what I wanted. Now, about 5 years ago, when I was writing my memoirs, as I was counting the episode, it suddenly occurred to me that, as a matter of fact, I had learned from that incident because the way I had handled problems thereafter is I reframed them. And so 3 years ago, I asked myself the question, and it was stimulated by the murder of George Floyd. I asked myself the question, why don't I put a group together to help individuals who are having problems, to teach them how to reframe the problem and come to better solutions?
I wonder if you think about yourself more as a revolutionary or more as a tinkerer, thinking about systemic discrimination and social stratification and, in these institutions that we've discussed, whether it's Harvard or MIT or Xerox or any other paragon of organization. You were in leadership roles in these organizations. These organizations are fraught with systemic discrimination. And this, horrible event of George Floyd in 2020, how does that all begin to come together for you? And what are you doing in that world now? I talk about that. I'm so curious. Please.
Yes. Well, as I was sitting there looking at George Floyd being murdered, something occurred to me. Here was a group on the sidelines trying to get Chauvin to take his knee off of George Floyd's neck. And I began to wonder if someone had taught George Floyd how to reframe problems, would he have been able to avoid the situation that led to this? Would he? And had those on the sidelines been taught how to reframe problems, would they have been more successful in their attempted interventions? That also led me to think that in spite of their desire to help, there was one individual who was losing his life. And as I reflected on my own experiences with discrimination, whether personally or helping others, is that there was always an individual who was aggrieved. And although presently we do have lots of great programs, DEI programs, that seek to improve the environment and improve awareness of microaggressions, etc., often the individual who's aggrieved is not addressed. So I decided that it would make sense to put a group together where we could focus on the individual and empower that individual to learn how to reframe problems and to find what I call a better problem to solve so that they can have the appropriate dialogue with the manager and come to a resolution that is not only important for them and not only gets them to their desired outcome, but also improves the work group that they're in. So a better problem to solve is a problem which not only helps the aggrieved individual, but also helps others in the work unit.
And you have a book that you released on this topic earlier in the year, addressing systemic discrimination by reframing the problem.
Correct.
And can you describe that model in just briefly, please?
Yes, there are three or four elements to the model. The first part of the model is a focus on equity and inclusion. And my approach is that in any organization, those are the two key things. In fact, it struck me that in the Declaration of Independence, those two elements are there. You know, that all men are created equal and endowed by the Creator with unalienable rights, amongst them, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, all men created equal, all is about diversity, okay? Created equal is about equity, and being able to pursue happiness, life, and liberty is about inclusion. So within our Declaration of Independence, there are those elements. So the first part of it is to focus on the issues of equity and inclusion in an organization. And in fact, what I demonstrate in the book is that one could put together a very simple 2x2 matrix and describe the type of culture an individual is experiencing in an organization.
I love your VIPs, your victors over injustice in their professions. Can you say some more about that as well, please?
Yes. So, second principle, first, the organization, equity and inclusion. Second principle, the individual, focus on empowering the individual. Now, one of the things that an aggrieved individual always struggles with is whether they're being heard. So I put together the VIPs, victors in overcoming injustice in their profession. These are individuals who have suffered discrimination in their professions, who overcome it. And they examine the case as reported by an aggrieved individual from a viewpoint of what are the issues of equity and inclusion that individual has suffered. By using VIPs, one, that individual knows that they are discussing with people who can empathize, who have been there, who have walked in their shoes. So, they know they're being heard. Secondly, those individuals are focused on issues of equity and inclusion. And then the VIP, based on what they've heard, as well as their own experiences, begin to explore whether they can find a better problem to solve to get to the desired outcome of this individual.
And how do you connect this current work, this current book, with your memoir as well? Do you see themes that run throughout these works, your memoir defining moments of a free man from a black stream, a memoir? How does it do?
As I was writing the memoir, after I described the Xerox episode in the memoir, and I continued to write, some incidents of discrimination, it suddenly occurred to me that what I had been doing is reframing. And I had some very significant instances of discrimination in my life. For example, I was at one point the senior vice president and the head of research for Ciba-Geigy, which is now Novartis, in the US. And my boss, who was the global head of research and development, who was in Switzerland, Novartis is a Swiss company, as was Ciba-Geigy, and he called me one day to Basel, Switzerland, to tell me that he was going to retire. And although it was generally accepted that I should be his successor, that was not going to happen because of my ethnicity. Needless to say, I was crushed. I returned to the US, asked my local boss, CEO, and he confirmed that that indeed was the case. And so instead of, just being totally distraught, I then got to the situation of, okay, what is the outcome that I desire and what should I do? And so I immediately picked up the phone, called a headhunter and said, look, I would like you to find American companies who are looking for a global head of R&D. And I do not care about the size of the company. It doesn't have to be a large company, but I am ready to be global head of research and development. And they shortly came back with two companies, and I actually went to Marion Merrill Dow. Now, the interesting thing that happened is about 3 years after I joined Marion Merrill Dow, Hertz, which was a German conglomerate, bought Marion Merrill Dow, also bought Roussel-Leclerc, which was the number one pharma company in France, combined them with their pharma and created what was then the third largest pharmaceutical company globally, and turned to me to be the global head of research, and shortly thereafter, the global head of research and development. So I ended up being the global head of research and development of a top 5 global pharmaceutical company, which was denied me 3 years prior to that.
Well, it illustrates the point that of what is good and what is bad. It certainly illustrates that in each of these situations, certainly reframing puts you in a different spot. Do you think you were hardwired to do that as a 5-year-old?
I probably was. I grew up in a very poor circumstances. My mother and my 4 siblings, we lived in one room, with shared kitchen, shared bathroom, etc., with others that lived in that yard, and that's how I grew up. So I learned to accept a lot of things. As a matter of fact, one of the things that really helped me when I came to America is that shortly after, I guess about literally months, I met a man who was in the Alcoholic Anonymous, and he told me about what is now, I know it's the Serenity Prayer. I used to refer to it as the Alcoholic Anonymous Prayer. And I really recognized that, as a matter of fact, as a kid growing up, I was already doing that, namely, asking God to give me the serenity to accept the things that I could not change, courage to change the things that I could, and importantly, wisdom to know the difference. And as a kid growing up, even in school, there were times when I took on the teachers and famously took on the principal of one school because I felt he was being very, very unfair. And I took him on in front of my classmates.
And how are you serving the public today? In safe haven dialogues, helping people to reframe problems, create solutions, working through your equity and inclusion and individual engagement as the next phase of DEI. How do people work with you?
Well, we are now promoting and marketing. In fact, we have just it should be out by the middle of October. We are republishing the book because I got some very good, I think, input and advice. That the title was a little bit long, and the recommendation was made to me to change the title to "Until You Walk in My Shoes," and with subtitle a reframing methodology to overcome systemic discrimination. Now, the reason why that resonated with me immediately when that suggestion was made, and the group of authors with whom I was having this discussion, they were making different suggestions. That particular one struck me. I said, because as a matter of fact, the reframing process is about getting individuals to walk in their grief's shoes. That's part of the process. And in the book, when we describe the rationale, in the very first chapter, we give an example of an inability to walk in an aggrieved person's shoes. So it's just totally apt. So we will bring it out. And once it is out, we will get back to really promoting and marketing very aggressively. I'll use that term. But in the interim, we have been doing webinars. For example, as a matter of fact, on the 22nd, in a few days, I'll be doing the first of three webinars at Lehigh University. A few months ago, I did a webinar for a group from Howard Spelman in North Carolina A&T, their distance learning group. And so we have been doing a webinar. Soon I'll be doing a webinar for an informatics group. So that's basically how we're hoping to get the message out, is to offer webinars and workshops primarily. And of course, I'm available to give talks, etc.
Wonderful. And it's been so great to be in conversation and in dialogue with you today, Dr. Frank Douglas. And all of his contact information will be in our show notes today. So I encourage you to visit them, and also to visit Safe Haven Dialogues, LLC at safehavendialogues-llc.com. And you'll find that in the show notes as well. It's a good way to find out about the VIPs, the services that Dr. Douglas and his organization and team offers, his books, and other activities. So, Dr. Douglas, if you were to provide one piece of wisdom as we part relative to eradicating systemic discrimination in any of our institutions, what would that be?
What it would be is that we recognize that systemic discrimination has been around forever. Okay, it's not something new. Therefore, it will not be solved in a short time frame. And to bear in mind the Confucian scholar that said the following: "Tell me, I will probably forget. Teach me, I might remember. But involve me, I will learn." And if we really want to change behavior, we have to involve people. And this is why we do this process, this reframing process, because part of it is to get individuals to see the problems from the aggrieved perspective, to walk in the person's shoes, and then to find a problem that not only meets the desired outcome of the aggrieved individual, but improves also the environment within which that aggrieved individual works. It is very simple.
Wonderful.
If an aggrieved individual goes to have a conversation with a manager, and it's about all the problems that are happening to that individual, versus here's a problem that is affecting the group, and here are some solutions for the group. And by the way, if we did this, it would also solve my problem. That's a different discussion.
Wonderful. It's been wonderful to be in conversation with Dr. Frank Douglas. Again, please visit him at safehavendialogues-llc.com. And until the next episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horn, stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership, and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horn.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horne.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Authentic Change Podcast.